Well, good morning and welcome to the 411 on Leadership, brought to you by Dale Carnegie of Orange County. Also hosted and produced by Sitch Radio here in Irvine. For all your podcasting needs, make sure you click on the link and take a look at Sitch Radio. Great people, great experience here working with Sitch. So today, Steve Thomas is not in studio with me, and he is home because today is his wife Cecil's birthday. I don't know if that's why he's not here, but it's her birthday today. And Cecil, we want to say happy birthday to you, and I hope you get to enjoy your day, and hopefully Steve treats you right. Joining me today is somebody who I've had a chance to get to know over the last 3 to 4 years and have just appreciated so much. He is Steve Verburg, author, presenter, speaker, and owner and president of Dale Carnegie of Orange County. Steve has spoken to my life in so many ways in regards to areas of leadership, mentorship, sales, you name it. There's so many different areas I've had a chance to learn from Steve over the last few years, and it just made a lot of sense for us to take a moment and hear from Steve today as we talk through leadership. And we base that, we've been talking the last few weeks on the article by Chris Westfall in Forbes on the 12 irrefutable laws of leadership. And so, Steve, thanks so much for joining us and being here in studio. We're glad to have you.
Thank you, John. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, good. And one of the things, Steve, is your journey in how you got to where you are as a leader. And I mean, that's been a lot of different things. And over the years, you've shared with me some of the different things. So talk to me, how did you what was that journey like for you as a leader?
So for me personally, it was one of those things where one of the virtues that I've always strived for is a strong work ethic. And so when you have a strong work ethic, no matter what job you're in, you kind of rise to the top, especially in these days when a lot of people aren't looking to put a lot of effort into what they do. So I found myself at a very early age, the age of 19, in a management position. Okay. And so not to give away my age, but that means I've been in management for a lot of years. And so I've seen good stuff and I've seen bad stuff, right? I've seen the right way to do it and the wrong way to do it. And for those people that can actually look in retrospect at their lives, you learn a lot of your lessons from seeing things done poorly or seeing things done the wrong way. You have those few highlights of those people in your life that really inspire you because they do it the right way. So I've learned through both scenarios. I've seen people do it the right way. I've seen a lot of people do it the wrong way. I've unfortunately done it the wrong way a lot of times. So I've learned from my mistakes, and so put a few decades on there, and there you go.
Well, one of the things that, and you it's a great point, Steve, because we're all going to make mistakes, right? We're all going to stumble. None of us are going to walk through leadership journey perfectly. Even as we're trying to become a leader, it's not going to always be perfect. And I know a lot of times that's a challenge because we're trying to do things great. We want to get noticed. Recovering from mistakes is important. And why is that such a big deal? Because we're all going to stumble. And you said you made mistakes, but you've recovered. You're Steve Verburg, right? Now, what is that? What does recovering from mistakes look like?
So I recovering from mistakes, I guess it would depend on the size of the mistake, John. I mean, there are little mistakes that we can do every day, right? Little minor mistakes. Big mistakes are obviously going to take a lot longer to recover from. So when you're talking about leadership, for example, if I continually make the same mistake over and over, then that becomes what my team expects from me, right? So if I'm continually, let's just say, ignoring their recommendations, right? These are the frontline people dealing with the customers. I'm continually ignoring them. Then they'll come to expect that doesn't matter what they say, I'm going to ignore them. So therefore they start to shut down and not even give their opinions.
That's great.
So that's a mistake that would take a long time to recover from, because then you have to gain their trust that, hey, I'm actually going to listen to you. Right. And it's not just going to be once that you'd have to listen to them. It'll be multiple times before they'll start trusting that that's part of your character and that's who you are now, because you've, for such a long period of time, demonstrated the opposite.
Right. And thanks for that lead in. Today, one of the things we wanted to talk about is character in leadership. And, in that article by Chris Westfall, he addresses two things. One, that leadership starts with character, and character is everything. Mm-hmm. What is character in leadership? And we're not talking about jokey joke character, right?
Right. Yeah. So character, if I had to describe it best, character is what makes you who you are, right? So if you think of your hand and you think of virtues as the fingers, these virtues come together, right? And that character is your palm, who you are.
Okay.
And so the virtues that you emulate are going to determine what your character is. For example, if I get up every day and I say, okay, I'm going to courageously face my fears, right? Let's just say I'm afraid of public speaking. I'm going to get up every day and know, okay, I have to speak in front of people. I start to develop that courage to face my fears every day. Right. And so it's not that I don't have fears. It's that I have the courage to face the fears. So that becomes part of my character, is having the courage to face my fears. Right. Okay. So with that being said, character can be learned or trained, because you can work on each of those virtues that go into your character of who you are.
Okay. That's great. No, I appreciate that. So it becomes kind of your core, how all the rest of your leadership things are played out and demonstrated, whether it's working with people, it's business partners, whatever the decisions that you make and expenditures, all those things then kind of grow out of that.
Yes. Yeah. Dale Carnegie would like to say practice makes permanent. So whatever you practice on a regular day becomes your default. When the pressure's on, when things aren't going real well, it's basically going to come down to you're falling back on your habits, and your habits are created from what you practice each day or what you intentionally practice. Now, that doesn't mean that one day you could do the wrong thing, right? Mm-hmm. I could, going back to the example of the fearing public speaking, right. I might turn down an opportunity to speak in front of 1,000 people because I'm just too nervous about it. That doesn't mean that I'm no longer a courageous person. That just means, okay, I slipped. I didn't face my fears this one time. So you can continue to work on it and build up your character.
One of those things in characters that we see often is somebody who's not willing to admit when they're wrong or give credit to somebody else, kind of own that idea, that success, whatever that is. But I know that you shared with me before is I learned a lot of the things through Dale Carnegie. He comments about when you make a mistake, how you should address that, right?
Yeah.
So what's kind of the approach that we've kind of learned as a leader in when you do make a mistake or you're wrong, what do you do with that?
Yeah. So from leadership, a really important part of engagement these days is that people have to know that you're human. People have to be able to connect with you. Right. So part of being human is that we have flaws and we make mistakes. If we, as Mr. Carnegie said, if we admit them quickly and emphatically, then they can see, okay, they've made a mistake. They're acknowledging their mistake. They're human, right? If we try and play that off that it's somebody else's fault, right? It wasn't my mistake. My team is the one that missed the deadline.
Right.
Now, all of a sudden, you don't have the integrity or the trust of the team, because they know whenever there's something that goes wrong, you're going to blame somebody else instead of taking it upon yourself, right? The leader with a lot of character, if we're talking about character, right? Yeah. They're the ones that are going to stand there and take the blame when something goes wrong, and they're going to give credit to the team when something gives right. They don't have to be the center of the spotlight, right? those leaders that go out looking for, hey, it's all about me, it's all about me, it's all about me. Those are the ones that typically people don't like to work for, and they'll have higher turnovers, and something about them will rub you wrong, right? When you talk to them, you're like, okay, that person has a big ego, or they're a little hard to be around.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a challenge. And you reminded me of something when we were talking about that. There is a book, and some of you are familiar with it. It's called Extreme Ownership. And Jocko Willink talks about how in they had an assignment that they were working on as a team, and they didn't execute to the level that they wanted to. And they did the situation report, recap of what went on, and we're talking about it, and what went wrong. And he asked the team what went wrong today, and each one of them kind of said, well, I didn't do this, I didn't do that. And he said, no, he said, at the end of the day, it's on me as the team leader. I didn't explain, I didn't do the things to help you guys, to give you the tools that you needed to succeed. And so owning that and saying, no, it's on me as a leader. If our team doesn't get to where we need to be, it's because I didn't help make that happen. And we don't see that enough in leadership, do we, Steve?
We don't. And the thing that struck me as you just mentioned that quick story is that leaders create other leaders.
Yeah.
Right. So everybody on the team was taking ownership for their small portion, which means he created a team of leaders who acknowledge the fact that they need to be accountable for their own mistakes.
Which, as you mentioned earlier, you're setting that example now of what the next person coming behind you should be, and giving them that model to be a good leader.
Mm-hmm.
And in addressing that, sometimes, Steve, when we're looking at character, we're looking at leadership, one of the problems that we run into is sometimes we don't know what some of those issues are, or we've called blind spots. I am that guy that doesn't return the phone calls from the team when they need it, and they're like, well, why, how come we never, or whatever it is, shows up late or blows off appointments with people because I don't think they're important, but I got other stuff that's important, right? And so I don't realize the impact of that. What do we deal with that? How do we handle those kind of situations, Steve?
So, obviously we all have blind spots in our lives, and the people who are closest to us can always point out those blind spots, but we're not always good at listening. So one of the things that we'll often recommend is for people to do, 360-degree evaluations. That's where you're getting feedback from your team,
right?
The people that report to you, the people that are your peers, the people up the chain. But even taking that one step further, you could include your customers, what their viewpoint of you is. And if you're really courageous, you can even include your spouse, right?
Yes.
Then you get a whole different viewpoint of what and who you are, right? But what those 360-degree evaluations will do, and there's a lot of different ones out there,
right?
Obviously, from a leadership standpoint, we'd be talking about a leadership 360, but they'll show you the areas where your perception is considerably different from other people's perceptions. Sometimes you're right on, but a lot of times we'll think we're really poor in an area where people think we excel, or vice versa. We think we excel in an area, let's just say communication. I think I'm a great communicator to my team, and it'll come back as, no, your team thinks you're really, really bad at communicating. So then once you've identified those blind spots, that's where you can set up a plan to actually address those blind spots. And there's a lot of different ways to do that.
Well, and I do want to come back to that, because I think, knowledge is important, but there's that knowledge trap that you can just learn. And then what I do, 3 years later, we do another 360 and it's the same thing. We don't want to get into that. But you wrote an article. One of the things that Steve's also has done, he's written a lot of things, and you've talked about you had an experience where there was a leader that you worked with who kind of liked it that people didn't like him. Like he thought if people liked him, he wasn't doing his job. And so he kind of wanted to be that jerk, and he kind of wanted those bad reviews on Glassdoor, whatever it is, right? I mean, he clearly didn't get a good understanding of what his team thought of him.
Yeah. That particular individual was at an organization that we were working with, and it was a CEO. And the CEO, in his words, was, no, I like the bad reviews on Glassdoor because all the best CEOs get bad reviews on Glassdoor. And it was skewed thinking, right? It was, well, if they have bad reviews, I want to have bad reviews too. And so it really kind of highlighted his character, if you will, of the fact that he wasn't about helping others. He wasn't about helping the organization grow. He was about getting recognition and being like these other CEOs that he put on a pedestal and said, well, because they have bad reviews, I want bad reviews. Well, he had a lot of turnover.
Yeah.
A lot of turnover. His organization was restructured several times. The problem is when you're in charge of the organization, somebody needs to remove you from that if you have that point of view. So he didn't get removed. So the organization's their productivity and their profitability went way down year over year, and he wasn't open to actually working on himself. It was always somebody else's fault.
Yeah. And that's one of the things we're talking about: leadership character, and growing and developing as a leader is important. And understanding that we don't know it all. And I love, there was a sit-down interview with Bill Gates and Warren Buffett, and they both talked about how they take time every morning to read. And the reason was because they realized that they don't know everything. Here's two of the most successful people in the country, and they take time to learn and to grow and develop. And I think if that's the case, that's a good example, right, to follow. If that's somebody who realizes that, and as we work on ourselves and we work on who we are as leaders, hopefully that helps our character, right? That builds out those kind of things in our lives. So you talk, Steve, we did the 360. We've learned some information. We've grown. We learned that there are some areas that I can work on as a leader. What do we do with that? Where do we go from there?
Yeah. So as a leader, once we've identified those areas, we have a lot of different options.
Okay.
Right. We can go with getting a mentor, getting an accountability partner, getting training, getting one-on-one coaching. There's just a slew of different options that we can take depending on what we want to do. Now, the challenge is when your character is got a negative connotation to it.
Okay.
And I think you read the book, What Got You Here Won't Get You There, by Marshall Goldsmith. And he talks about this in his book, which he says a challenge with a lot of leaders or executives is that they'll try and change a negative trait, and they might do it right 20 times in a row and then slip up and fall back on their old habit one time. But what the team will see is that one time. They won't see the 20 times they did it right. They'll see the one time they fell backwards and say, oh, there's the real John coming out, right? Yeah. Instead of, oh, look at all the progress he's made. So one thing that Marshall Goldsmith recommended in his book was you have to let your team know, hey, this is an area I'm really working on.
Okay.
Right? Let me know when you see me doing it right. And when you do that, you set the stage for success, because then they're not only seeing what you're doing wrong, they're actually seeing that you're making an effort and progress forward.
That touches on another thing. To do that, though, that takes a little bit of vulnerability as a leader.
It takes humility.
A lot of it, right?
Right. And that's another one of those virtues, right? If you're not a humble person, and we're not talking about fake humility. We're
No
talking
humble
about
brags.
yeah. We're talking about real humility,
Okay.
right? To say, hey, I see that I need to work on this characteristic, this trait, this value, this virtue, whatever you want to call it. This is an area that I'm struggling with, and this is what I'm going to work on. And if you broadcast that to your team, yes, that can make you feel like, okay, I'm a little vulnerable. Oftentimes, if done right, what that will do for the team is say, oh, you're human, right? They'll actually have more respect for you for addressing those deficiencies than just pretending like they don't exist.
That's good. That's good. And it's not a blanket excuse to keep being that. Well, I'm just frank. Well, no, you're a jerk. Let's, we got to work on that.
Yeah.
And
yeah. Well, going back to what I said earlier is that, character can be learned or trained. So if you say, well, for example, what's a good virtue to use as an example? We'll use humility because we were just talking about it. If you say, well, I'm not really a humble guy, it's just who I am. I like to brag. That's because what you've done your whole life is every time you've done something successfully, you've looked for recognition, or you've told everybody, hey, look at me, look what I just did. Yeah. Now, if you start to train yourself in another way, right? Instead of bragging when I do something successful, let's just say I'm going to keep my mouth closed and or give the credit to my team. Then what I start to do is I start to develop humility, but it takes time, right? You can't build a habit overnight. It takes a lot of little instances to start to create a characteristic of your personality that's actually going to stick. So again, you can't be frustrated if you mess up once or twice. Right. What you have to do is continually try, because every time we try, we make it stick a little bit more.
Right. Well, in so many areas of our life, we're willing to look for outside help. I get a nutritionist to help me eat better. If I play golf, I get a golf instructor to help correct my swing and to help me improve. And I recognize and understand that their job is to make me better, right? That I have a coach because he's gonna see what's wrong in my swing, where I need to adjust, change my stance, all those kind of things. But for some reason, we don't look at leadership development that way, like having someone identify areas I can improve. Why is that so important to have that outside person looking at me and trying to help me find ways to grow?
Yeah, that's a tough question to answer, because, in today's world, many people think it's all about them, right? It's all about, what do I want to do? I'm going to set a goal and it's all about me to make that goal. When in reality, we are social creatures, right? Yeah. We need other people's input. We need somebody to help us with our accountability, right? We can use the easy example of New Year's Eve resolutions, right? New Year's Eve, people make all these crazy resolutions. I think statistically it is within the first 6 weeks, 90% of them have been broken. Right? Because they don't, first of all, they're not specific. They're not accountable to anybody, right? They don't have somebody there holding them accountable. So when you talk about leadership training or leadership evolution, if you will, if you don't have somebody that you respect holding you accountable, and that's a big thing, respect. A lot of people think, well, I can get anybody to do it, right? Or they think they can get their spouse to do it. And not that you don't respect your spouse, but that's a whole different level.
It's a different dynamic.
That's a different dynamic, right? That's a person you may disagree with, several times a week, right? Versus a coach or accountability partner that's going to say, hey, This is what the goal was.
Mhm.
This is what you committed to. Why didn't you do it?
Right. So in those things, if we're looking to develop our character, we recognize that there's some areas of learning and growth that I can do as a leader and improve. It so happens that Steve actually offers some of those services and here locally. So we encourage you as a leader to take a look at that and tell us, Steve, what are some of those areas as a leader specifically that I can take advantage of?
Yeah, so at Dale Carnegie, here in Orange County especially, we do have all of those options available. We have the one-on-one coaching. We have the 360-degree evaluations for people who do have blind spots. And we have on-site customized corporate solutions for organizations that actually want to develop their whole leadership team.
Okay.
And we see that more and more often where organizations are looking at their entire population and saying, okay, I have a lot of high potentials here. What should I do to actually develop them to the next level? So two programs that we often suggest are one, the Dale Carnegie Skills for Success.
Okay.
And what that does is it gives you the type of skills that you need for people to want to follow you.
Okay. So be a leader that people actually want to work with.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then our leadership training for managers, which actually then dives a little deeper and gives you the skills to lead them once they do want to follow you. So process versus the people side, right? One, I have to be the type of person that people want to follow. And then I have to have the skills to lead them once they do follow.
That's fantastic. And it's so important to grow in those areas. And then you address that as an organization. Maybe I'm a higher level manager, but there's people below me that can use some of this. Maybe I've been able to take advantage of that or had mentors or someone show me. But there's new upcoming, what you refer to as high potential leaders that can use some of that guidance to give them some of those tools. Maybe they've got some of those inherent characteristics, but we want to reinforce that, right? We want to build and develop that. And so it sounds like you've got things in place to really make that happen.
Yeah, so going back to the very beginning of our conversation where we were talking about learning from other people's mistakes or learning from their successes, if you actually give them training, you're giving them tools at the beginning not to make severe mistakes and to have the tools to help them be more successful.
Hopefully shorten that development cycle.
There you go.
Right? Minimize the pitfalls, give them those tools to succeed and get there where you want to faster. So thanks so much. Hopefully that you've learned that Steve is a wealth of knowledge. He's got a lot of great insights. He's done leadership. It's not just because he's been there, but he's also studied, learned, and put a lot of that into practice. And I've had the privilege to spend time with you and to grow from that. And so I appreciate that. And Steve, as I asked you, you had a great quote as we close out for the day on leadership. So what is that? Share that with us.
Yeah, so the quote is from the article that you mentioned. It is from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and it's, "The ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands in times of challenge and controversy."
Wow. So the test our mettle, right?
There you go. That is your character, who you are when the chips are down and things get rough.
Wow. Well, thanks so much for joining us once again as we look at the 411 on leadership. I was your host today, John Campbell, the Director of Mission Relations for Pacific Justice Institute. Have a fantastic work week.